Hi everyone. So today is Q&A day. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I am just here to answer your questions. I do have questions that came in ahead of time that I will be responding to. So if you have questions and you're joining me live, put your questions in the comments. If not, I'll be answering the questions I received ahead of time. So I am going to jump right in. Like I said, if you have questions, put them in the comments. I am immigration attorney Lilian Chukura, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So basically, what today is all about, if you're just joining me, is a Q&A session. So if you have questions about U.S. immigration, please feel free to put them in the comments. And while I'm waiting for you to ask questions, I'm going to be answering questions people already sent me ahead of time, okay? So the first question is: my wife was pregnant when I passed my citizenship interview. And she gave birth before I took my oath ceremony. Is that child eligible for the CRBA? That is the automatic birth, right? Automatic citizenship at birth for children that were born outside of the US. Well, this is going to depend on whether you meet all the other requirements before their birth. So being a citizen is only one of the requirements. So if that's the only requirement you were missing, then yes, they would qualify for CRBA. But if there's other requirements that you have not met yet, then they would not. So it's really important to look at all the requirements, not just when you become a citizen. Becoming a citizen is only one requirement. And if you met all the other requirements and the child was born before you took your oath ceremony, before you actually became a citizen, then they would qualify on the CRBA. So it's really important to distinguish the two. When you go to your interview, your citizenship interview, you pass the interview, you are not a citizen yet. Okay, until you take that oath ceremony, and then you are a citizen. So even though the child was born after the interview, the child is still eligible for CRBA because the oath happened before they were born. Okay. All right. So questions, put them in the comments. All right. So I see a question from Instagram. Dr. Trinidad, what is happening with Biden's new rule? Well, we're still waiting for that to go through. It has to go through the normal rule making process. So it has to be put on the Federal Register. And we are expecting that to be done by later this summer. At least that's what they have been telling us, is that by later this summer, we should have full guidance on what that looks like, what the application process is, and what type of documentation they're looking for that. What I'm telling people that may qualify for it, remember that is for people that have been physically in the US for 10 years or more and are married to a US citizen as of June 17, 2024. So if you meet that requirement, you want to make sure that you're putting together your physical presence documents, right? Documents to prove that 10 years of physical presence in the US. You want to start getting that together, but we wouldn't have a full picture of what that application process is like until it's actually put out on the Federal Register. So we're expecting that later this summer or early fall, but should be sometime this year, but hopefully sooner rather than later. Okay. Next question from Bola. When I get a feedback after RFE, okay, when will I get a feedback after RFE family I-485? It depends on what the RFE was for and who sent the RFE. So if the RFE is for medical exam, and it was sent from the National Benefit Center, or it was sent by, if it was sent by a service center or the National Benefit Center, then it doesn't really say anything about how long your case is going to take. It's just the normal processing time. But if it was sent by a local field office, so if the address is like your local field office, then you want to make sure that you're looking at that. And typically, if it's a local field office that sends that request for medical exam, it means that they are looking at your file and they want to move forward with your case. Typically, though, with RFEs, 60 to 90 days is a good measure. If it goes beyond 90 days, you can reach out to USCIS, again, depending on where your file is. Okay. If your file is still with the National Benefit Center or a service center, they're just asking for that document to have it ready for the officer. But if it is the officer requesting the request for evidence, then 60 to 90 days typically is what they're looking at for that. How do you feel about Border Patrol in the US? Well, most most border patrol agents follow the rules of what they're given, right? They're told how to process people. So I'm not sure what you mean by what is my feelings about them. They are people doing their jobs. It's the policies that they are following that's the issue, not really the people. So how do I feel about the policy? The policy can definitely be better. It can be more, um, it can be better. Okay. But as far as the people that work at Border Patrol, they are most of the time just following the procedures and policies that they are given, whether they like it or not. They have to follow them. Okay. Next question. What about the DACA program? There is no update on DACA at the moment. So there is a case going through right now as far as whether new DACA applications can be accepted. However, if you currently have DACA, you can still renew your DACA. You should not let it lapse, meaning don't let it expire before you file for a renewal. Okay. So if you currently have DACA, you want to make sure that you are applying for a renewal before it expires. But for new applications, you are not going to be seeing any processing of that case at the moment because there is an injunction and it's not going to be processed. Okay. Okay. So first off, a lot of immigrants in US are killing citizens and taking most jobs and Medicare. What can the lower class do? Well, I'm not sure what statistics you are looking at, but most of the time, immigrants are on the lower end of committing crimes in the US. And as far as taking jobs, they have to have legal authorization to work. So they cannot work in the US unless they have legal authorization to work. And they do not qualify for Medicare unless they have legal status in the US. So just want to make that clear because sometimes there's some misconceptions that people can come to the US and without having any form of status in the US get Medicare. That's not possible. They have to have legal status in the US for that to happen. DACA by the new law. So Dr. Trinidad, I'm not sure what exactly you're asking about. So DACA, if you're talking about the DACA, again, when it comes to the new program that is announced, we do not have the details yet. Okay, we're still waiting for the details on how that works, what the requirements are going to be, and how that application process works. Okay, so I can't really give you details on what that is going to look like. All right. See a question on YouTube. Tamika asks, with Biden PIP, how can I provide evidence of good moral character? It's like a letter from my employer and achievements. I want to be prepared. Great question. So when it comes to this, you want to have you want to make sure you do not have a criminal history. That's number one, right? That's what they really like when USCIS says good moral character. They're looking at criminal history. You can So when it comes to that, if you do have criminal history, you want to get, letters and other things showing that you have been a person of good moral character in spite of that criminal history. However, if you do not have a criminal history, you are in a better position. You can get the letters and include the achievements and prepare all of those. But when they're talking about good moral character in these situations, they're looking at criminal history. Okay. So, and with these applications, USCIS is going to be doing a background check on everyone. You're going to most likely have a biometrics appointment where they take your fingerprints and your pictures and do a full background check to make sure that there's nothing they can find in your background that makes you ineligible, like makes you a person of not good moral character, right? So that's what they're really looking at there. But if there's no criminal history, you can get the letters, but the focus should be on the 10 years of physical presence because that's going to be the key. All right, next question. Can the election affect the parole in place coming at the end of the summer? Yes. Yes, it can. So, if the administration changes, they can change the policy, right? So, parole in place is not law in the sense that Congress did not enact a law that says, um, you know, what this policy says. So this is a policy rule, not a law that was passed by Congress. Even though they do have, right? I want to make this clear. Even though the president does have the right and the power to include more people into the parole in place law, it is still policy and it can change when if the new administration comes in, right? If a new administration comes in, they can change the rules because remember, before this there was no parole in place that's specifically for spouses of U.S. citizens that have been in the U.S. for 10 years. That was a presidential enactment. That's a policy change. So it is possible for it to change. We hope not. Okay. We hope if there is a change in administration, this is one of the things that we'll say because it is for US citizens, right? This is not just, anyone that comes to the US can now get status or get a parole in place. This is specifically for spouses of US citizens. So hopefully the fact that it is benefiting US citizens will cause any administration to leave it in place. All right. Next question. Why does China have so much power in Africa? I have no clue. This is about US immigration. Okay. I do not have any information on that, right? If you have questions about US immigration, please feel free to ask. But if it's not about US immigration, I cannot answer your question. Okay. There's just a couple questions on Instagram that it's beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. Um, Remember, if you have US immigration questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. One thing I do want to mention also about the parole in place program is that, there's people that think it's amnesty and it's not. Okay. It's similar to the parole for Haitians, right? Um, so a Haitian national that's outside of the US can get someone in the US to sponsor them and get paroled into the US, right? So that's what this is more like. It's a parole. It is not a status on its own. It's parole for 3 years. That parole can lead to a work authorization, and that's it. The parole in of itself does not lead to a green card. You still need a US citizen spouse or a US citizen child to file that green card application for you. The parole is only giving you a legal entry into the US if you did not have a legal entry to start with, and work permit for that 3 years. That's all it's doing. It does not in of itself lead to a green card. Just want to always mention that. Hi, Meet Charles Show. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Um, and remember, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I am literally here to answer your questions. It's Q&A day, so ask me all your questions. But while I'm waiting on that, I'm going to um, answer a question that I received ahead of time. So, question is, my uncle is a US citizen and he adopted me when I was 2 years old in Africa. But he filed petition for me in 2021 when I was turning 29. So am I still considered an immediate relative, or and how long does it take for me to immigrate? So once you are over 21, you are no longer an immediate relative of a US citizen. So if you're the child of a US citizen, the second you get married or you turn 21, you are no longer considered an immediate relative, which means your processing is going to take longer for you to get that visa. Right now, those are a visa is becoming available like 7 years from the time the case is filed. So from the time the I-130 is filed, it's taking about 7 years, 7 to 8 years, for a visa to become available for you to then be able to file for the visa and come to the US. If you get married in the meantime, it's really important to note this. If you get married, just know that 7 to 8 years is going to turn to 15 to 16 years. And that's the sad part, right? That's the sad part about the family-based immigration process, and that's why I want to be doing these Q&As, because there's so many misconceptions and things out there that you have to know the timeline of how long these things are going to take, so that you do not do things in the meantime that make it impossible for you to then get status. So you want to make sure that if you are the child of a US citizen and you want to immigrate to the US and you're already over 21, once you get married, your processing time, the time it's going to take for you to be able to get a visa, is going to be much, much longer. It's going to double. So you want to really keep that in mind, that once your application is filed, you may just want to stay single and not married. And also want to mention this, having children does not take you outside of that, right? It's only marriage. Because sometimes people get confused on that. Next question. Can we do dual citizenship online? So there's no application to do dual citizenship. It's kind of a matter of law. So if the country you're originally from allows dual citizenship, then all you have to do is apply for US citizenship. Okay? So it's not really applying for dual citizenship. You can apply for US citizenship. But just know that you want to make sure that the country you're from allows for dual citizenship, because you may end up having to pick one. Okay. So I know, for example, India, China does not allow you to be a dual citizen. So if you're originally from China, for example, and you want to become a US citizen, you have to give up your Chinese citizenship. All right. But as far as the US is concerned, you can be a dual citizen. You just have to apply for US citizenship and be approved. And you can do that application online. All right. But you just have to pay attention to the country you're from and make sure that you are, able to become a dual citizen. And if you're not able to become a dual citizen, then, figure out what visas or whatever is available to you to be able to go back and forth to the country you're originally from once you become a US citizen. All right. Melinda, you are so welcome. Let's see. I was married and registered in Nigeria. What would be my next step to get my husband and stepson in the US? All right. So, first thing is you need to file an I-130. All right. You already have um, the marriage certificate. That's great. That's really the key, right? And then you want to make sure you have all the documentation, proof of your relationship, all those stuff. You do have to file an I-130 for your husband and your stepson. This is assuming, right? I always have to say this, assuming you are a US citizen. You have to file a separate I-130 for your husband and a separate one for your stepson. If you are not a US citizen, if you're a permanent resident, you can choose to file for your husband and then have your stepson included in that application once it gets to the National Visa Center. But if you become a US citizen in the meantime, you have to now file a separate I-130 for your stepson. So it's really important to know that detail. But if you're already a US citizen, you can start that visa process. I will warn you, and this is something people, I will warn you on this. It is going to take time. It is going to take some time because getting a visa in Nigeria right now is getting a visa interview. It's taking well over a year. Well over a year. And the reason for that is, as you remember from the last administration, we had a Muslim ban, which Nigeria was included on the list for Muslim bans, which means that visa applications were not being processed, right? And then we had 2 years of COVID shutdowns where the embassy was not scheduling applications. So that's Muslim ban backlog plus the COVID pandemic backlog. It's taking time to get through all of those. So just know you have to be patient, okay? And because I have seen this, you have to not only be patient, but make sure that your husband and stepson understand why things are taking so long, and are patient on their end as well, because it is going to take longer than they expected to. And you just need to be prepared for that, and they need to be prepared for that, and make sure that they are not listening to all the stuff out there that's telling you that you're going to get an interview in a month. And if you don't, something is wrong. Complete BS. So just know that. Okay. But the process starts with an I-130. And if you would like help with that, feel free to reach out. You can always go to my website, lilylegal.com, click on contact us, and you can schedule a time for us to speak, and see if we can work together to make it happen. All right. So if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. All right. Oh, great question, Melinda. So for your husband, you would do the I-130 and the I-130A, and then for the stepson, it's just an I-130. The I-130A is only for the spouse. So if you're filing a spousal petition, then you'll need an I-130A. But if you're not filing a spousal petition, I-130A is not required. So for people filing for parents, people filing for siblings, people filing for their children, they only have to file an I-130, no I-130A. So, all right. So I don't know what just happened, but I'm back. Okay. So the next question I have here is, um, after my parents are approved for a U visa, can I petition for them? I'm a US citizen, or do I have to wait 3 years? So, this is a great question. So, when it comes to the U visa, If your parents entered the US without authorization, once the U visa is approved, not the bona fide, but the actual U visa is approved, you can then apply for the parents to become permanent residents. You don't have to wait for the 3 years because now they have a legal entry. The U visa being approved is now a legal entry, and you can now go straight to applying for them I-130, I-485, and waiting for that to be approved. You don't have to wait the 3 years. The 3 years waiting is only if they are going to adjust their status based on the U visa. But if they are adjusting their status based on you being their child and you filing for them, they do not have to wait the 3 years. All right. And the next question is, how long does it take to process a 601 waiver? So 601 waiver is the current processing time for that is 27 months. Okay. It's really important. 27 months for 601 waiver. That is different from the processing time for a 601A waiver. Okay. Always have to give that disclaimer. A 601 waiver is going to be processed faster than a 601A waiver every single time. Because a 601A waiver, I believe the processing time right now is like 50 months the last time I checked. So it's at least 3 years of waiting. Okay. But the 601A is 27 months. Let's see. Next question. Remember, if you're joining me and you have questions, put them in the comments. Just trying to get through the questions that I received ahead of time as well. All right. Hi, my husband filed my I-130 last April 2023 and got approved this April 2024. When I filed, I was not pregnant, but this year I am. My case is DQ, meaning documentarily qualified by the National Visa Center, and patiently waiting for the schedule of the interview. May I ask if we need to inform USCIS about this pregnancy? Thank you. So it depends. So if your husband is a US citizen and they meet the requirements, right, the 5 years of physical presence in the US to give the child citizenship, it's going to depend on when the child is born. Okay. So if they meet those requirements, then once the child is born, you want to make sure that you're doing the CRBA, the consular report of birth abroad, to make sure that the child has documentation that shows they're a US citizen and they are able to travel to the US with you once you have your interview and your case is approved. Because if you do not register their birth, they're not going to have a way of coming to the US with you. Now, if your husband does not meet the physical presence requirement to be able to give your child automatic citizenship, then you still have to wait for the child to be born, but you can inform the embassy that you are pregnant, and they will. So at this point, USCIS is out of it. Okay. Once you are DQ'd, once you are waiting for your interview to be scheduled, USCIS is out of it. It's really with the embassy. Sometimes the embassy will give you a way of applying for the I-130 at the embassy for the child so that everything can be approved and you can travel with your child. But if the father of the child is a US citizen and meets all the requirements, you want to make sure that you are applying for that consular report of birth abroad so that your child can get their citizenship documents and be able to travel with you to the US once you get your visa. All right. So if any of you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. Really happy to respond to that. And thank you all so much for joining me. It's been some really great questions. And I always love doing these because even if you don't think, right, that your questions are important, they are, because there's someone else out there that has the same exact questions but is too shy to ask them. So please feel free to ask me questions. If you're watching this on the replay and you have questions, put them in the comments. Like I say, I do these Q&As once a month where I do go through your questions. And in the meantime, I do respond to your questions as well. Okay. Because they just help everyone. That's the main thing. It's about helping each other get through this crazy immigration system. That's all we do here. All right, so I don't see any other questions in the comments. If you have gotten value out of this video so far, please go ahead and hit the like button for me. Just let me know that you are enjoying this content and you want more of it. But yeah, please remember, oh, questions coming in. So feel free to keep asking me questions. I will stay on and answer your questions until there's no more questions. All right. How long does it take for I-130 to be approved for my mother? It depends on when you filed. Right now, I-130s are taken anywhere from a year to 2 years. But if we're being realistic, it's more like a year to a year and a half, unless there's like a request for evidence that slows things down. Okay. But typically it's a year to a year and a half for that to be approved. So, perfect. So remember, if you're getting value, like the video. If you would like to work with me or at least get a consultation with me to see what you qualify for, what you can do, how the process works, feel free to do that. In these Q&As, I can only give you general answers because I don't know your particular situation. I don't know the details of your life, so I cannot give you specific information. But if you would like a more detailed consultation where I actually dig into your history and figure out what options are available to you, you can do that by scheduling a strategy session with me. I offer a 15-minute free strategy session where we can talk and see how we can work together. You can schedule that by going to my website, lilylegal.com. And if you click on contact us, you can actually pick the date and time that works best for you right on my website. Or you can call my office at 508-443-1788 to schedule that strategy session. One more question. Can an I-485 be approved before an I-130? No. No. An I-130 must be approved before an I-485 can be approved because the I-485 is based on the I-130. Okay, so before an officer can approve an I-485, they have to approve the I-130. There's no way around that. They can approve an I-130 and, keep processing the I-485, but they cannot do it the other way around. I'm guessing you're asking how long after approval of I-130 would the I-485 be approved? It depends on your field office because some field offices are able to get through an a 485 application within 6 months, and other ones are a year plus. So it really depends on your particular field office. What I typically recommend is looking at the processing time for your field office. Okay, so the I-485, you want to go on the USCIS website, look at the processing time for the I-485, and then select your actual location, right? The USCIS office that serves your actual location. That's what you want to look at to see what the realistic processing time would be, all right, for the I-485. And I have a video on my YouTube channel going step by step on how to check your processing time. So if you want help with that, go ahead and look at that video. It will literally takes you step by step on how to find your processing time. If applying for a child under 10 years old, how long after can you apply for their I-485, or do I have to wait until the I-130? So if the child is in the US and has legal entry into the US, then the I-130 and the I-485 can be filed at the same time. If the I-130 is already filed, you can still file the I-485. You don't have to wait for the I-130 to be approved. Okay. Again, this is if the child is in the US, has a legal entry, and is not in immigration court. I should also say that. Okay. There's different, there's more to it, but on a basic level, the child has to be in the US and have legal entry into the US. If there's more things going on, like the child being in immigration court or things like that, get a consultation, okay? Please, to make sure that you are filing the I-485 in the right place. Because if the child is in immigration court, and they are not charged in immigration court as an arriving alien, you will not file the I-485 with USCIS. You would file that with the court. So you want to make sure you're filing it at the right place. But if the child is in immigration court and has to file their green card application, the 485, with the court, you must wait for the I-130 to be approved first, and then file the 485 with the court. Like I said, it can get a little complicated depending on the particular situation. So that's why I always say, depending on what's going on or the questions you have, it may be best to schedule a strategy session with me, to just make sure that you are getting the most accurate, tailored answer to your questions. Again, general information on the lives, but the strategy sessions get you a more detailed answer to your questions. Okay. All right. So as always, on the bottom of the screen, you'll see the information for scheduling a strategy session. So you can do that by going to my website or by calling my office, as always. All right. All right. So I do not see any other questions. So thank you all so much for joining me. There will not be a live next week because, 4th of July. I will be spending that time with family. So there won't be a live next week, Friday, but the week after that, we're going to go back to our regularly scheduled programming of Friday lives. All right. Thank you all so much for joining me. I truly appreciate you all for asking your questions, for being here with me. And I will be seeing you very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. And I hope you enjoy your 4th of July. Bye.